Tracking. I love tracking. The versatility of learning to use different tracking techniques in the video world is extremely valuable. In this series of videos, I'm going to take you through some real-world tracking situations and discuss the different types of tracking solutions that you can turn to. Over the next few videos, we will look at planar trackers and 3D camera tracking. But to start things off, we're going to look at the much ignored single point tracker. This is the original tracker, and it's a lot more powerful than many people know. We're talking about logo removals or replacements, color correction masking. There are all sorts of VFX techniques that were developed using a single point tracker, long before planar tracker and 3D tracking came along. Okay, we have Fusion 17 loaded, Fusion Studio 17. What I'm going to do would work as well if you just want to get into Fusion through DaVinci Resolve free version. I'm not going to use any plugins or anything like that that would take any extra money. I just prefer working in the standalone Fusion. I find for the most part it's a little more stable. We're going to start with a loader node, find some footage, and let's go into this shot here, load it into our viewer. And we're going to take this shot and we are going to drag it up to our timeline counter with the shift button held down. That is going to make my timeline the exact length of the shot itself. And let's just see what we got here. So we got a driving shot. Obviously it's not perfectly steady. And what we have been asked to do is remove where the logo was on the car that they have covered up with what appears to be a piece of black gaffer tape. We want to get rid of it altogether. So how do we do this? Well, if your first thought is, well, you need to do a planar tracker on the hood, yeah, that might work. And if your second thought was, well, this is all moving, so we need a 3D camera tracker, yeah, that might work. But you know what'll work? Probably just as easy or just as well and way easier is just the good old single point tracker. So let's bring in a tracker. Load that up in our viewer. Make sure we're on frame 1 here, frame 0. And we're going to put our tracker right on the object that we want to get rid of. And let's track forward from here. Shouldn't take too long. And looks like we have a pretty good track. Let's see how good it is. We're going to go to the operation. We're going to call it a match move. And we're going to change the merge version or the merge operation from foreground over background, which is just the basic tracker. And we're going to change it to background only. And we'll see what that does for us. What you can immediately see is that we have now stabilized the shot. And it is showing us how much it has to move this picture to do that stabilization. But if we were to simply zoom in now on this part of the car, and I'm just going to click on the input loader node to get rid of the tracker points, we can see that the badge on the car is essentially locked in position on the screen. So we have a nice stabilization going. Again, I'm going to go back to frame 1. We're going to add another node, and we're going to add a paint node. Make sure we're looking at the paint node. Now, the paint node usually defaults to multi-stroke. We want to have a stroke node. Stroke allows the one paint stroke that we do to cover the entire range of the shot. we want to do a clone, and we may want to reduce the size of the brush. We'll leave it where it is for now. We're going to increase the softness around the edge of the brush, and I'm going to decrease the opacity of the brush to maybe just around half. And let's just zoom in on our hood here. Looks like there's a little watermark here, so maybe we'll get rid of that as well. Now with the clone tool, you hold down the Alt button, much like in Photoshop. That says where you're cloning from. And then now as we drag, we are painting from that area. So we're just going to very slowly, which is why we made the opacity quite low, get a nice blend this way of all of our strokes blending over top of each other. It makes it less noticeable. And we'll just paint out this badge. And we'll just do a couple of strokes from the other side. And that looks pretty good. So we're going to zoom out. So now what we have is a stabilized version of this shot with the badge painted out. And it works because we are painting on a stabilized version. So the item we want to paint out isn't moving. It's staying right where our stroke is for the entire version of the shot. So our next step really is to unstabilize this shot. So we're going to take that tracker, we're going to paste it so we have the exact same tracker from here that's stabilized. We're going to put it at the end. We're going to feed into the background our original shot, and we're going to feed into the foreground our paint from that shot. We're going to select this tracker, and we're going to go to the operation, and instead of background over only, we're going to go back to foreground over background. So that will put our painted strokes over top of our original shot. Let's look at our tracker. Let's just click somewhere to get rid of the on-screen display there. And let's just play this down. So now we have destabilized the shot, stabilized it. We've now reverse stabilized it, if you would rather refer to it that way. But we are reverse stabilizing the version that had the badge painted out. And that gives us a nice tracked badge in about, I don't know, what was that? 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Not very long. And that's all off of a single point tracker. So now we have real-time playback on this, and it looks pretty good. So stabilize and destabilize. Very versatile. I'll be honest, the first time I saw that used, my head just about exploded. I couldn't wrap my brain around what the other artist was showing me. Now it's one of my go-to tools for logo removal. But let's say you wanted to use a tracker to drive a masking function. Can you do that with a single point tracker? If you couldn't, would I be sitting here right now? So again, we've got the attempt to cover up a logo, but it looks pretty bad. So let's start by cleaning that up. Same method. Let's get a tracker. Let's track that logo area. We are not at frame 1, so let's track backwards from here. Sorry, we tracked from the end, not backwards. So let's go reposition our tracker and let's track forwards. Get a better track there. Okay. So we seem to have a good track on this. So same thing. Let's take this, let's match move it. And let's go background only. And that should give us a stabilized shot. And it looks like we have a stabilized shot. Let's go to frame 1. Let's add our paint. And again, we want to do a stroke. We want to do a clone. I like to raise the softness and drop the opacity. And let's just go straight down. Now, every time you release the mouse, the stroke tool will reset itself so that you can paint over your previous strokes. If I don't release the mouse, it will assume that that original shape is still in there, and you'll end up painting with the shape you were trying to get rid of. Try it out. It's hard to explain how it works, but every time you release your mouse button and start a new click, it resets what your area of clone is coming from. And that looks pretty good. Still see a bit of a ring in there, but I think we'll call that good. Take our tracker, copy it, paste it, feed the background from the original, feed the foreground from the paint tool, look at our tracker and change the operation to foreground over background. And see what we have. Once again, we have the camera motion, but the paint is automatically staying with the laptop because as far as the paint is concerned, at this point in the node tree, that laptop is not actually moving. It's staying stabilized, and then we unstabilize the entire operation. Okay, but let's say there's more that needs to be done on this shot. Let's do a little color correction on this shot. So we'll bring in a color tool and maybe increase some contrast, drop the gamma down a bit, and maybe we want to warm up this shot. We'll warm up the entire shot. And by warming up that entire shot, maybe we've decided that has now made the laptop a little too yellowy in there. We'd like it to be that original silver again. So let's take our tracked version of the laptop, and we're basically going to composite it on top of itself before the color correction and after the color correction. So the color corrector is on the background, the uncolor corrected version is on the foreground. We're going to go back to frame 1, and we are going to mask out that laptop to isolate the color correction away from the laptop. So now we have him and everything being affected by the color corrector except for the back of that laptop. And we'll just soften the edge on that a little bit. Okay. And now we can obviously see that the all the gain and contrast adjustments we have done are also affecting this laptop. So we're going to add another color corrector in off of that clean version. So we won't be warming this one up, but we can certainly increase the contrast, maybe drop the gain, maybe drop the gamma, maybe drop the saturation. And we'll say that's what we're looking for. But again, as soon as we move off of frame 1, we're going to see that our mask is not sticking with the laptop. So let's call up another tracker. Let's plug that in from our original shot. And let's track the movement of the laptop. And we'll just do, even this corner here should work. Okay, so we have a tracker. Let's rename this tracker laptop. And we have a mask that we want to move automatically in position with the laptop. Just going to adjust my polygon a hair here. I'm going to take the animation off of it. I don't need it to animate. I'm just going to bring it in a little bit there and a little bit there. Okay, back to our original or our final product. This polygon, rather than manually keyframing it, we just want to have it follow whatever this tracker says it needs to do to stay on the laptop. So we're going to click on our polygon. We're going to go to the center adjustment of our polygon, and we're going to connect it to laptop. So this is the tracker we just named laptop, and we are going to connect to the unsteady position. That is the position that has been tracked to show how much movement there is. And now we'll keep the polygon selected here so we can see how it reacts. And it is now automatically moving with that tracker we just created. And if we click on something to get rid of our screen, our vector, we can see we now have a color corrected man with a slightly different color corrected laptop. And we have also tracked and painted out the back of the laptop. And again, we used a single point tracker to control the mask, and we used a single point tracker to stabilize and paint out the laptop and then destabilize the laptop. No planar tracker, no 3D camera tracker, just a nice basic tracker. Sure, it's all easy when your object doesn't leave the frame. But if it leaves the frame, then you clearly need to jump to a planar tracker or a 3D tracker, right? Wrong. Let's look at a situation where the point you want to track leaves the frame before your shot finishes. In this example, if we wanted to track the bottom corner of this picture frame for whatever reason, we will see that it leaves our field of view before the shot itself finishes. Now, yes, I know in this particular instance we could track the top corner instead, but this is a demonstration of how to adjust your tracker and not decide what part of item you should track. So let's say for whatever reason we really need to track the bottom corner of this. What do we do when it leaves the frame? Well, let's find out. So let's add our tracker. Let's position it on the section we want to track. And we're going to track every frame, and we're going to go forward. So Fusion doesn't actually give us an error telling us that it has lost the tracker. It just automatically jumped. Once that point left frame, the tracker just automatically jumped to something else and continued on its merry way. It honestly doesn't even know that it had an issue. But we can tell it had an issue by the shape of our tracking data And if we check out our spline, turn on our tracker, again, just zoom in on this if it will let me. There we go. We can see where our shape is this nice gentle curve, and then all of a sudden takes a right-hand turn at Albuquerque there. So I'm just going to select those trackers that are clearly wrong, and might even go back. I think that one is okay. So we want to pick it up from here and do a append to our track center. And that is what this button right here is, track center append. We're going to click on that. We're going to move back to our original arm that we used to position the tracker. And we will now move it up to a different portion of the item, but that is in theory on the same plane and is moving at the same speed, and is in line with the tracker that we originally did. And we'll track that the rest of the way. And we can see our overall shape now is much more consistent. Now bear in mind that there is some lens distortion on this shot. We could try to account for that before we do our tracking. But because the camera itself is handheld and it's rotating left and right and up and down on the corners and probably doing a little bit of a roll, even that lens distortion fix isn't going to give us a perfect matte replacement here. We're probably going to have to do a little bit of an animation on our matte anyway. And the matte that we want to do is, because the idea here is maybe we want to color correct this frame a little different than the rest of the frames. So let's add in a color corrector and just go black and white. Let's go back to frame 1, and let's say we just want this one single item to be in black and white. So we will bring in a polygon tool, and we will mask off the item. Tighten that up a little bit. And then we will take the center of that polygon and we will connect it to the unsteady position of our tracker. And now the polygon mask is going to move with the tracker. Now, as I said, there's a little bit of camera roll because of the handheld nature of the shot. Remember, we haven't stabilized this one. This is just a straight up tracker. So because of that, we're probably going to have to do a little adjustment. So we'll go to our last frame and we will adjust our polygon. And we'll go in the middle somewhere. And maybe a little tiny adjustment here. And let's see what we're left with. And that looks good. So the tracker gave us 90% of the work we needed to do to matte out this shot. We did have to do 2 keyframes to finish off a little tweak on it, but just using that tracker helped us get to that point. And again, within that tracker, we were allowed to do an append to the center of that tracker for an item that leaves the screen. Hopefully this has given you a bit more understanding of the power of the single point tracker. Don't think you have to jump straight to a planar tracker, because you might not. In the next video, we're going to expand the single point tracker to a multi-point tracker for some screen replacements and logo removal on shots with a bit more of a perspective change.
Thanks for watching.